Hey, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me about your awakening where you're like, wow, I could live my life kind of on autopilot, maybe forever.
Basically, in around 2016, when my daughter was about a year old, maybe even less than a year old, I had these moments when I would be up late at night feeding her and would notice that she was looking up at me and then I was looking down at my phone. And I have a background in mindfulness, and as I said, I am kind of like existentially consumed. So I saw that and I was like, this is not how I want to be living my life. And it's not the image I want my daughter to have of a human relationship. And I have a background as a science journalist, so I also was aware that, babies' eyes only focus 10 or 12 inches in front of their faces, which is thought to be specifically so they can bond with their caregiver. So I also freaked out on the level of what am I doing to my daughter's perception of or her ability to bond with me as a parent. So I freaked out on a number of levels, which is also a theme in my life. And and I also really like to try to turn my personal issues into professional projects whenever possible.
Yes.
And I realized that
I understand that feeling.
Yeah, right. So I was like, well, I'm not the only person struggling with this. But that was 2016. So there were some books that talked about the potential problems of excess screen time or the addictive design, frankly, of these apps. But there wasn't a plan to help solve the problem. So that's what led me to write How to Break Up with Your Phone.
And How to Break Up with Your Phone is a very fun, like if you can describe an intervention as fun, but that's that's how that book felt to me. I saw it on the shelf and I felt accused by it.
Oh, good. That was my intention.
Because I think in one of the first pages is like, check your whenever and just see, take a guess about how many hours you might actually spend on your phone.
No big deal.
And it was like, at 8. I think the answer is 8. It was just a wild number.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. So that's the heartening part. But then it's also super depressing because you're not alone.
Yeah. I think what's so nice about that tone is so many of us don't realize how much it is so radically shifted how we know how to pay attention that we can't tell when we've fallen into like a tar pit. And I think especially when we've got something big going on in our life or we're toggling constantly between all sorts of responsibilities, people with high stress, emotional or otherwise lives can probably find themselves sucked into every spare moment in between into this device, which is designed to suck in and then maybe not feel the sort of like aliveness that they're looking for.
Well, I think it's interesting to kind of reflect on why we reach for our phones. So I came up with this exercise that helps me and it might help other people called WWW, and it's short for what for, why now, and what else. And so the idea is that if you notice that you're reaching for your phone, and I actually recommend people put a rubber band or a hair tie around their phone so there's some prompt that makes you actually notice you've picked up your phone because it's so often on autopilot. Yeah. But you ask yourself, like, what for? What was the purpose? So did you actually have a real purpose? Were you specifically looking for something or trying to communicate with someone? Most of the time, there probably won't really be one. And then you ask yourself, well, why now? And so maybe there is like a time-sensitive reason, but most often it's an emotional reason.
Yes.
So going to what you're saying, so it's like, okay, well, am I feeling kind of lonely, or am I feeling a little anxious? Like, for example, are you at a conference or a festival where there's all these people and you don't know what to say, and so you just reach for your phone almost as a security blanket or like a worry stone kind of thing.
I had this very weird moment where I was almost, I don't want to say murdered, but like capsized by like a giant, I'm only thinking the funny word, sea flap, but stingray.
Okay. No, I got that actually just from this, which was like really impressive.
Really terrifyingly large stingray. And almost capsized, and I'm still in the middle of like a bay, just having recently evaded this horrifying feeling of like, oh my gosh, am I going to go into the water with this stingray? And then I found myself 5 minutes later, just like scrolling on Instagram, and I looked over at my old man friend, and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I just had to check something. He's like, no, you're self-soothing.
Oh, that's so funny.
And I was like, that's exactly what I'm doing.
So you can either put a rubber band around your phone, or you can just bring along your old man friend to be like, no, you're emotionally compensating for something right now.
You felt terrified about this stingray.
Exactly.
And now you're just like, it's really important to you that you check to see what Trina is doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's normally an emotional component to that. Then the next step is to ask yourself, like, what else? So what for, why now, what else? Like, what else could you do? Either to get that same reward. So is there another way you could have self-soothed? Like maybe give your old man friend a hug or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or
Across kayaks.
across kayaks. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Or, could you have
Yeah.
actually done nothing? So I've actually had a number of times where I've been in like a ride share or whatever, and I'm looking out the window. This has happened twice. And the person's actually asked me if I'm okay because I'm just looking out the window. Yeah. They're like, are you all right?
You're right. It's like a psychotic episode.
Yeah.
Just to not be part of the attention economy.
Exactly. I'd be like, no, I'm fine. I'm just looking at a cloud.
Are you okay?
Yeah. Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Where am I taking you?
That is so funny.
Yeah.
No, I'm just looking at scenery.
Right.
I'm just
trying to...
noticing details of the life that we are living.
Exactly. So, and then you might, at the end of that process, I always like to say, you might also decide you actually do want to be looking at your phone in that moment, and that's fine. So like, you don't want to beat yourself up over that.
Yeah.
It's just making sure that it's intentional. So, but I do think that that process is a way to kind of make sure that you're not just getting sucked into your phone and then not either appreciating what's around you or dealing with what's around you or what's happening, because it is, I think we do use our phones as drugs. If you think about like what a drug is for, it's often to alleviate suffering in some way, right? To take away pain. And we do that all the time with our phones.
I normally assume I'm incredibly busy because the feeling is that I'm doing all these things. But I think one of the fears I have is that if I was less busy, I would have to create the possibility of doing other things that aren't work, and not just like email, but laundry or, just I would find other little being useful things to do. I would wash more dishes. I would come up with a new project that does not bring me joy.
Okay.
And you have like a very nudgy like attitude about, hey, if we decided that we were going to clear out a little space, we might find that there could be a little more possibility
To not just do laundry?
to be fun.
Yes. Well, I think that to speak a bit about our busyness, we just do make ourselves so busy. So a lot of us do have legitimate things we need to get done, whether it's for work or family or just self-care. So I don't want to, and obviously a lot of your listeners, are caring for other people. So those are big responsibilities that come with a lot of emotions with them. But we also do fabricate busyness, I think, sometimes to kind of cover up an emptiness maybe we feel inside for ourselves. And almost, again, is like an anxiety management thing, but it's kind of interesting because it makes you anxious to be so busy, but we keep ourselves really busy.
Yeah.
And we totally will just try to find other tasks to do if you take other things away. It's like whack-a-mole of like little tasks.
Yeah.
So for me, what happened is that my husband and I were doing this practice, which I really recommend people try, of taking a digital Sabbath. So on Friday night to Saturday night, we were taking breaks from all technology. And that process is really interesting. When you first turn everything off, you kind of freak out because your brain is so used to these little dopamine hits that suddenly my brain is like, you need to buy everything on Amazon and you have all these things on your to-do list. You have all these emails you need to answer. How can you possibly turn off your phone? And so I tried to cope with that by just writing them down on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And, we lit a candle. We tried to make a ritual out of it, which I think is also really nice. It's like creating a emotional boundary in terms of time and intentionality. But then my experience, and then the experience I've heard from so many other people, is by Saturday you kind of feel like, oh, actually time is slowing down. Because we dissociate on screens. It actually really does make our perception of time speed up. So time slows down, and there's just all these opportunities and this sense of calm that comes from not being on call all the time to our devices. So that's really nice. So we were doing this digital Sabbath, and I was sitting on the couch in our living room, and our daughter was napping. She was probably like 1. And then my husband was out, and I was thinking to myself, I'm supposed to be so happy as a new parent to have this like hour to do anything with. And instead I was like, I don't actually know what to do, because normally I would just look at whatever was on my phone. So I actually had a freak out in that moment. But that also inspired me to ask myself this question that I'd been asking people who helped me with how to break with your phone. And that was, what's something you say you want to do, but you supposedly don't have time for? Because I realized,
what is something you say you want to do,
but supposedly don't have time for?
You definitely are pretty sure that you don't have time for it. When you've asked people that, what kind of answers do they give you?
Well, it's a lot of things that people used to really enjoy, like hobbies they really used to enjoy. But it really speaks to the fact that we keep ourselves so busy, we think we don't have time for these things. But then if you add up the hours that you spend on your phone, and of course some of that time is like useful or necessary or enjoyable. So I'm not
Yeah,
saying
it's
that
not
phone
that.
time is all bad, but there's certainly like the times when you're just mindlessly scrolling that isn't time well spent. So
Yeah, you describe all the like fake the proxies for fun, all the
yeah,
fake fun.
yeah.
Where we think we're having fun, but these are not high quality experiences.
Exactly. So there's a lot of stuff that's designed to make us feel, I mean, just give us quick hits of pleasure in the form of kind of these jolts of dopamine.
Yeah.
But that doesn't ultimately leave us feeling fulfilled, kind of like the junk food of fun. So
Can we give some examples of that?
sure. I mean, the biggest one is mindlessly scrolling through social media.
Yeah.
So if you're like, okay, I've got a little, 20 minutes before bedtime, and what could I do? I mean, often in that case, you're also pretty tired, right? So
Yeah.
you're not going to like, that's when you shouldn't decide, like, I'm going to learn a new language, like, from like 9:45 to 10. But a lot of times people will like scroll through social media and then they feel kind of just like
Yeah.
exhausted, or they just mess up their sleep. Or people will watch TV or Netflix or whatever beyond the point of enjoyment. So, a certain amount is fine. And if you really love the show, that's great. But if you end up just letting things play on autoplay because you're too tired to even find the remote control, and it's all, programmed to just autoplay.
Yeah.
Like, that's anything that makes you feel gross after you do it.
Yeah.
But that's for leisure. That's probably fake fun. So
Yeah.
to go back to the answer that I had to the question of what do I supposedly not have time for, my answer was learning the guitar, because I played piano for my whole life, and my grandmother gave me money for a guitar in college, and I was really close to her, but I'd never learned to play it really. And so that inspired me to sign up for a guitar class. And long story short, when I was in this class, I just was having this feeling of energy and just feeling alive, and this joyfulness and this feeling of letting go. And I got really interested in what that feeling was.
Yeah.
And then I had one of those like stupid revelations where it's like, what is this feeling? I'm like totally intellectualizing it. And then I was like, oh, I'm having fun. This is fun.
You're like, wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
This sneaking feeling.
Yeah, there's a word that describes this. And just as, I got interested in writing How to Break Up With Your Phone because I was trying to solve my own problem with my own phone, I was like, oh, I want to have more fun. This feeling, it feels really good. I want to try to figure out what it is, what research has been done on it, and how you can have more of it. So that led me to write The Power of Fun. But I ended up concluding that, what I think of as true fun is totally different from that fake fun, that kind of junk food of fun that we get when we engage in things like mindlessly scrolling through social media.
Yep.